Hey guys! Happy Thursday. Okay, so here we are for chapters 7 through 9 of our Victorious Emotions book study. My name is Sally Lewis. For those of you who may not know who I am or are just watching this and maybe you're new to the team, I am under Jessica Heffley, a Diamond Ambassador, been here for 10 years. So very grateful and always learning. And things like this book study are one of the biggest things that I feel like I am just very grateful for Plexus. Yes, the products, yes, the income opportunity, but to have strong, faithful women always to encourage and pour into us and to lift us out of hard spaces and push us towards God's best is a gift that most people do not have in their lives. Some people, even within the church, may not be connected to a group where they find these things. And so just remember, as one of your core beliefs, this type of thing may be something that you don't remember that you have to offer other people. And I know that's a big part of a lot of our stories is the community, but also just this personal and spiritual growth that is going to affect every area of our lives. So let's get going with chapter 7. This was a good chapter. I don't know about you guys, but this aha moment of how creating solutions for emotional energy loss was really impactful for me. I tend to be one of those people that can feel overwhelmed or like feel really drained, but like not be able to pinpoint why. And really, I mean, these short chapters, like just I can't believe like how impactful just something in like that's like 4 pages. But how it really is so true. Like there are some people that are so much busier or have so much more going on or have been through harder things in life that can just keep going Energizer Bunny. And I'm like, are you on drugs? Like, what is happening? But really, the battle is here, right? And what's draining us is what's in here and what's in here, not necessarily all of the things that we've got going on. You look these joyful mamas that have 8 to 12 children and doing all the things and homeschooling and still keeping their business running. And I'm just like, what's going on with me? And maybe that's the wrong question because that's the belief. What's wrong with me that I can't do this, right? So I would love to hear from you guys. Maybe some key standout points. Obviously, I wrote some down too, but this is definitely going to be a more communicative time. I know Jessica enjoys that too. So, what do you feel like stood out to you in this chapter, and how did it mean to you? What did it mean to you?
I can start. One of the big things that I thought was interesting is how it's just in that second paragraph, I believe it says emotional beliefs are responsible for a very large percentage of our negative emotional stress. And I
Hmm.
think sometimes we don't realize how much of that is true and
Hmm.
how much we actually let in, or at least that's how I felt. I felt like that surely that can't be completely true. And then you start to think about all these negative thoughts you carry, and you're like, yep, that's probably actually very accurate.
Right.
So that was kind of a little moment I had.
Yeah, so good.
I just like that there's like like not just the negative side of it, but the positive side, that it's not just
Yeah.
that it can be draining to you, but that it can be energizing too. So that
Right.
remember like that we have that control over that, right? Like that it's not just like, oh, I'm gonna be like, oh, it's so draining to me. No, like I can choose to have that positive mindset and be energized in my emotions to like by what I'm choosing to believe today. So
Exactly. I think that too, because it's like we feel like before this knowledge, we're just like, this is just who I am, or this is just how I interpret life. This is just how life feels to me. And it's like the ability to like shrink in and be like, no, this is maybe a subconscious choice that I'm making, but it is definitely the propeller that I have put on the back of my boat to propel me not very far, right? So I wrote down to negative emotions equals energy loss, but positive emotions equals energy increase. So just even that thought of like, if I love how she said, like, if you feel drained and if you feel just exhausted, don't just look at the busyness. It's not the busyness that's keeping you exhausted. What are you thinking? What are your beliefs around what's going on right now? Who else? Do you or someone in your family, do you have someone in your family that is really prone to this? It's like I definitely deal with this, but I know one of my sisters for sure. Like I'm gonna like screenshot this entire chapter and be like, if you weren't gonna buy the book now, here it is. I feel like this would be really impactful for her for sure. So on page 56, like down toward the middle, this was one of the things that I had written down and had like this big mental aha moment from the podcast is when she said, what you're doing is not draining you. It's what you believe while you're doing it that drains you. In other words, the actions didn't drain me, but the fear of the failure or the stress of not measuring up or disappointing people was the real reason that I felt drained. And I think that that is just so true. I mean, I can look at any instance around anything, any place in my life where I'm hesitant or I'm feeling fearful on something. It's like, it's not the thing. That thing isn't really scary. It's what am I hyping myself up about? What am I thinking about this? And where is that really coming from? That inadequacy or that fear of failure, or like people don't like me or whatever it is, or blah, 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 right? I think that that is so powerful and so helpful for us to be able to like make that switch from living in this way and letting life drain us into like I used to, this is horrible. I used to tell my husband like I feel like I need a lobotomy sometimes. Like I don't know how people just walk through life like not taking all of this like on their shoulders and like feeling this way. Like I wish I didn't, you know. But that is where the Lord comes in. Like we don't need a lobotomy. We need the Holy Spirit and we need to submit to the Holy Spirit because we are letting our thoughts change us and make us live a certain way a lot of the times. I love how she shares so much of her personal story in this and like what she was dealing with, but I also love that she puts a lot of other words in there that we can relate to too, because some of the things that maybe she was dealing with aren't necessarily some of the things that you might be dealing with when it comes to like what her internal beliefs were. Um, but yeah, what else about this chapter do you feel like has given you kind of a new take on what life can look like for you and in that imagination she talks about?
I kind of want to go back to what you were saying around like not the actions that you're doing, but it's actually what you were thinking.
Hmm.
And you said the weight of this on your shoulders. I it like it helped me realize. So in the armor of God, it talks about the gospel of peace. Your shoes are the readiness and the gospel of peace. And that's a war, right? Like you're wearing armor. Why would we be talking about peace in a war? But truly, it's not about like now I'm going to sound like Kung Fu Panda. It's more like inner peace
Yeah.
and this piece of like the pressure isn't on me.
Hmm.
If God's telling me to do it, the pressure is on him.
That's right.
He can handle it. So as I'm doing these things, if it's draining me, it's because I'm taking the pressure that is not meant for me. I'm
Right.
trying to carry on pressure. Why would we do that to ourselves? And
Yeah.
our thoughts are the ones that are causing us to do that. But if we set our thoughts on I'm following my commander in chief, my king, I'm following him. He's got this. I'm just listening. I'm just going to do what he tells me to do. There goes
Right.
the pressure.
That's so
Yeah.
true. And I think it really does show us where our cracks are in our trust and what we actually believe. It's crazy though, because before this book and before this podcast, I feel like she's given voice to a lot of things that have just bothered me about my own walk with the Lord and about how I walk out my own life. And a lot of times like in life group it'll come up, I'm just like I'm frustrated because I'm like if I look at how I'm living or like what we're doing like at any given moment, what does it look like I believe, right? Like I know what I believe, but based on my circumstance, based on my relationships, based on my mental state, like what does it actually look like, I believe? Because I don't think that those match up a lot of the times. And this is what has made this book so good is like that's exactly what she's saying is like we think that we have these beliefs and when our body, our emotions, our life doesn't match up with the beliefs that we think that we have, we feel kind of like a fraud. We feel kind of like I know I'm a Christian. And I know this about God and I know this about what he says and I know what his word says, but we are having these big strongholds in our lives that are actually the things that are leading us still. And we're operating in those things. And then we feel guilt and shame because we're like, well, I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to believe these things. And I know that these are true, but my life doesn't reflect that all the time. And it's because we didn't have the tools maybe to really get those strongholds out and then replace them with the strongholds that we know are true. And so I loved on page 58 where she has like the Sam and Betty story, right? Sam and Betty, these like sweet names. And it was a really good picture of what it can look like. And coming from Sam's perspective, he may just think Betty is like, well, Betty, you're not being realistic. You know what I mean? Like, every time we've gone out there, that person yelled at me last time, or, the last time I messaged someone, they told me to, scoot off. And so this was a great example because Betty's excited to go and share the gospel. Betty's excited to go change people's lives because at the end of the day, just like Shana said, she knows that God's the one that's going to do it. And she's just excited to be a part of it. And it's like, when did we start thinking that cynicism was sacred, right? Like, when did we start thinking that negativity was just being realistic? There's a pastor that I love that I haven't listened to him in a while, but was really influential in our lives, like when we lived in Africa. And he said, the world will tell you, don't get your hopes up, but the Bible tells you that get your hopes sky high because your hope is in the one true God, right? Like, so we live this life of trying to live realistic and like, I don't want to get my hopes up. Like, this is, but that's like living based on our past, living on our experiences. We are called to live by faith and not by sight. And so I loved this part. Sam's belief led him to fatalism, hopelessness, and passivity. I don't know. Then maybe this chapter just is me. Maybe it's just calling me out. But did anyone else like feel that? And just you can see it through his eyes too, like the fake Sam in the story. Like it makes sense, like how he feels and why he feels those things. But why,
I think you are definitely not alone. And I will say too, just the understanding that my emotion comes from a belief, like that idea was big to me. Like I never thought of it that in depthly, I don't think.
Yeah.
But what I love is at the bottom of 57, she says, every thought that is of God will be energizing because he is the God of hope and life.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh man, that is so true. Like, if I could just capture my thoughts when I'm having them, if I can get more consistent at really capturing them as they come in, I will probably see a lot of those false beliefs or lies that I have believed. Because if it is negative and it feels daunting to me or something, there's something there because she's right. Every thought that the Lord has will lead you to hope and love
Yeah.
or life. And that hit me because I was like, oh man, that's so true. Like those negative thoughts, if I just will catch them and reflect on that, I could probably find a lot more roots there that I need to deal with.
For sure. And I think it was a good challenge too. At the bottom of it just says negative emotions based on poor beliefs about ourselves, others, or God are draining the life out of many children of God. And it's time to begin to challenge long-held energy draining beliefs. God has come to give life, not drain life. And that's exactly what you're saying. Like if we feel that way, it just shows what we're letting control us. And a lot of times that is not surrendering to the Holy Spirit, believing that the Lord is who he says he is doing what his will be done, on earth as in heaven. And we're just worried that we're carrying it all and we're worried about everything else in that moment. The little chart on the last page on page 59 before we move on was just really good too. just a good place to understand, like, when we feel drained, are we allowing ourselves to live in these things on the left, the fear, the codependency, the anger, the depression, the dread, and how can we partner with the Holy Spirit? How can we let the Lord help us to reshape our lives to confidence and healthy love and peace and joy and excitement? Because, like, the next chapter is going to tell us, like, that's kind of where we want to be, right? Like, when I look at my life and when I think about my children and how they're going to live and grow up, like, I don't want them to feel this way about their life. I don't want them to have fear and dread and anger. And it's like, man, how often do I let that really be what I operate out of? And that's because we're not taking those emotions captive and understanding where they're coming from. Okay, chapter 8, also really good. Emotions take us somewhere, right? I really loved how she was saying they're not just something we feel, they take us somewhere and they powerfully influence choices in our lives. So I wanted to just think for a minute. Maybe our negative emotions are probably all differing, varying degrees of similar things, but we probably all have, like, maybe a little difference of a stronghold of what they are. Um, but what would or does our life look like when we follow our negative emotions? Where does that end lead us if we're looking at destination, right? Um, in our health. So when I am low energy, when I feel drained, when I feel all of these things we're talking about, and I'm letting those things rule my life, I am not putting on my tennis shoes and wanting to go to my group fitness class, right? When I'm thinking, well, I don't have any friends in that class and I just feel alone and I feel blah, blah, blah. It does not energize me to want to go take care of my body, or I'm not like, let me just go walk outside in nature. No, I want to sit on the couch and escape from life. So in your life, in your health, in your relationships, and your finances, now that we have this knowledge, when we are not acting on it and taking those things captive, like, where are we allowing that to take us in life? Where are we allowing those negative emotions to take us in our life? And just, we don't have to write that down. That's not like something we want to put on the fridge, but I think it's good to realize I'm letting these things drive me to a place I don't want to go. I'm letting them turn me into a person that I don't want to be, right? So just think on that for just a second, and then we'll flip it and we'll use our imaginations, as she says. I see this a lot in my relationship with my kids too. Like, when I'm in the place where these things are controlling me, my relationship with my kids is also very different. And it's like, that's not how I want my relationship with my kids to be either, right? So flipping that, using our God-given imagination to imagine the good and the possibilities and the things that He has for us instead of all of the negative, crazy things that we use it for. If we are living in a healthy emotional state and our beliefs are recentered on who God says He is, on who He says we are, on trusting Him, what would that change about how you entered into your life and your health and your relationships and your job and your finances, obviously, in your business? Just think about what that would look like for a minute. You can write if you write, or if you just want to close your eyes and visualize what does that feel like? What kind of impact that you're making, or what kind of when you look in the mirror, what do you see when you're that version of yourself that God has created you to be? What does it feel like when you're laughing and hugging your kids, or at the dinner table? What are those things when the Lord is back in His rightful place in our lives and we're not steering? Hmm. Does anybody want to share and just encourage? Yeah, joy, gratitude, peace, feeling purposeful, safe, confident, and secure. Silly is one of mine. Funny enough, like I used to be a very silly person. They used to call me Silly Sally. And I feel like life draining situations has kind of pulled a lot of that out of me. And like when I think about what it feels like to be free, like to just be goofy and silly again and not feel, like you're in that self-protection mode or in just like, "Ugh, I'm just too burdened by everything else to be silly." Like laughter is a big part of that for mine. Yeah, free to just be who you are. That's good. I think sometimes it can be, if we are not careful with that, it can be, we don't want that to be a sad thing of like, this is who I should be, or this is who I could be if I wasn't broken, right? Like, that's not the point here. The point is that this is possible. Like, this is what God desires for us. Like, we're not supposed to live in bondage to these negative beliefs, which is why all throughout scripture, he's telling us to capture and to trust and to not fear and to, not do these things because he knows what freedom looks like and he wants us to live that way. Let's see, where are we going next? So at the bottom of 61, she started talking about avoidance and escape. And I think that that is a really cool segue into another area where yes, we might operate in these negative emotions, but then our body goes into this like protection mode of like, okay, well, now I just want to escape these feelings and these emotions. And I want to avoid and protect myself from things that make me feel this way, rather than understanding what's true and not true and realizing it's not that thing that I need to avoid or that person I need to avoid. It's this core belief that's creating these emotions. That is what needs to be fixed. She said, when our only goal is to escape what we fear, we often don't take into account where we're going. It is difficult for our brain to think logically and creatively when negative emotions like fear, anxiety, hopelessness, or inner pain are driving us. So I love how she said when we are under the influence, obviously that made me think of like a DUI, right? Like when we're under the influence. But rather than driving under the influence, we're living under the influence, right? So what are we living under the influence of? And that was like, I mean, people go to jail for driving under the influence of the wrong things. And like, Lord, put me in jail. Like, I put myself in jail for living under the influence. We have put ourselves in bondage, living under the influence of the wrong things. And so, avoidance, escape doesn't always take into account the destination. What does that look like for you? What does that mean for you? I will say for me, escapism is probably something that I definitely got to give back to the Lord and say, Lord, help me not, like, help me to work on this rather than just escape this or avoid this thing.
One of the things really recently that I've been going through is I have a friend of mine she's a coach, but she was talking to me about emotions and how realizing that our emotions are God given, right? God gave us emotions. It's okay to feel emotions, but at some point in time, we have to have a line drawn to where we stop feeling the emotions and then just look at the facts and make your decisions based on the facts. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable because the facts are what negative beliefs do I have or something
Right.
of nature. But that has always really helped me on really trying to capture that because I do feel like for a long time I was stuck in making emotional decisions or not really giving time for my body to feel what I feel, but then to be able to stop and be like, okay, now I've got to find the truth in what I'm
Right.
feeling. What is the truth here? And then how do I move forward on that? And
Yeah.
that's that her conversation with helping me separate that really helped me a lot. And I felt like that came up a lot here. And that's
Yeah.
something that I've personally been growing in.
Very good. And just how she said, was it last week, I guess, that we talked about facts versus conclusions. I think so often our negative thought processes think that we have the facts, but really we just have past experiences which have given us conclusions about certain things. It's not real truth. And so we're living under the false pretense that we have all the facts when really it's just the conclusions from our own life. And if there's anything truer of like, well, your truth and my truth, like it really is your conclusions versus my conclusions. Like she said, you can go through the same circumstance as someone else and draw completely different conclusions about it based on your core beliefs about who you are, about who God is, and about the situation. And so that is where different truths, because it's not real truth, right? It's not actual fact. It's the conclusions that we have about things. And so making sure we're always coming back to what is actually true about this versus what do I feel like is true based on the conclusions I've drawn about my own life. She said, basically like avoiding and numbing out doesn't really lead us to the destination that we want to go to. It really just prolongs the pain. I loved, her little horror movie thing of like when we're trying to escape and run away, like you're really not smart. We all make fun of the girl that runs up the stairs to get away from the murder, and like you can't get away up there. Where are you going? And it's like because you don't think rationally and you don't think creatively and you're not smart when you're terrified. And so if we live in this fight, flight, or freeze, really we're putting our body in these terrified situations based on what we've been telling our brain our whole life. That's why we can't think creatively and find solutions, and we're just running away. That was really a good word. So is our life becoming in and it maybe not be across the board, but maybe it's in certain situations, more about avoiding than accomplishing. I really liked her juxtaposition between those two words because when we avoid, we don't accomplish, right? And when we're accomplishing, we're not avoiding, whether that's avoiding emotional work or avoiding actual work, we're not avoiding in order to accomplish and to grow. So that was a good part to me. Let's see. What else did you guys have underlined in this chapter?
On page 64, the part about, I remember thinking that my past was keeping me from entering into the abundant life of Christ, but then God revealed to me that my past was not what was holding me back. It was the conclusions I made about myself when my past events happened that were holding me back. So again, it's your own interpretations getting in there. It's your own little brain getting in there. That's what keeps getting in the way.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Like the next chapter, how she sees, she has that chart that really like fleshes that out a little bit more too. I'm excited to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Right after what you read, it says, I realized I had more faith in my past experiences than in his anointing to determine my future.
Mm,
And I think like there's schemes from the enemy, right? Like that distract you from who you are meant to be and what he's calling you to do. And I think I think that might be like key for me. Like whenever I jump to the past to think about who I am is when I need to catch that and say, wait, 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 wait. What I went through isn't who I am. Who he made me to be is who I am. Was it in this book where she talked about when you get to heaven, if you were supposed to write a book, you're an author that never wrote the book? Yeah, okay. I'm reading like three things at the same time. So, but like when you get to heaven,
yes.
It was in
She
the
definitely talked about
podcast.
that in the podcast for sure.
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. And then like,
You
man,
were an author, you just didn't ever write anything because you were scared to do it. But that's who I made you to be. And it's like, well, dang, I should have. And that reminds me of Lot's
yeah.
wife too, though. I know Jessica's done a call on that before, of just like he says, like, don't look back. And she can't help it. And it's like we can't live looking backwards. Like that's not living. That's just rehashing things that don't matter anymore. Like if it matters going forward, he's going to continue to let it shape us and move forward, but we don't have to keep rehashing and looking backwards. Last thing on this chapter, I know we need to move on. I did love how I am definitely one that tries to control or feel like I'm responsible for everything, that kind of issue. But when she says trying to get to a new destination through sheer willpower is hard work, it can be fruitless if you are imprisoned or restricted by emotions that keep your hard work from taking you anywhere. Where is the other thing that she said? Oh, they are, let's see, she said, adversely, those who have renewed their minds with God's truth will fix their gaze on the prize before them, not on the obstacles in the way. They are led by their beliefs in God's faithfulness and in their new resurrected identity. They understand that there is more than one way to get where they need to be. Even when they cannot see the way, their belief that there is one will carve out a new pathway towards a solution. That was huge to me because I want to know. Like, I want to know that I'm doing the right thing. I want to know where I'm going. I want to know all the variables so I can choose and not be wrong and not look stupid or not, get in trouble. Like, all of those things, like, I'm trying to control to make sure that it's right. And it's like, that's not the point. The point is that living in new beliefs doesn't mean that we have all the answers. It means that we are trusting that God does and that we don't have to know. Like, we get to move forward and trust that he is who he says he is, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other, trusting in him. And that in and of itself is also incredibly freeing, because in order to live this joyful, happy, abundant life, we also don't have to know everything and to do everything right? Like, it's not like, well, let me fix myself so that I can live this joyful, abundant life that God has for me. It's like, no, the belief isn't in me at all. The belief is in who God is and what he's doing and who he says that I am, versus any of that. And so I really appreciated that too. Like, I can live in those new beliefs and I can live that abundant life and this joyful life free of all of these things without having to know where I'm headed, really, because the destination is his abundance for me, is his destiny for me, like is what he has planned. Also liked the propeller visual, like, change the propeller, get a bigger propeller, don't just get out and push the boat, right? Like, if the propeller is the beliefs and we have this tiny little propeller and rudder, like, our boat's never going to go faster, and us pushing it, isn't going to make it go any faster. But if we could change and get a bigger propeller, meaning new beliefs, then the boat's just going to go fast, because that's what it does. All right, quickly, let's move on to chapter 9. I know we're supposed to do work and worship in a second. We'll do that. Emotions affect how we see. Chapter 9. Whew, this was a good one. Another good one. This was actually where I had written down that negativity does not equal realistic thinking. Like, just because you're a cynic doesn't mean that you have like some sacred calling and you can see truth that everyone else can't see. It just means that we're negative. It just means that we're living by experience and conclusions and not by the truth of the Word of God. Have you guys had an experience in your life recently where you feel like your beliefs shaped maybe in a negative way or in a different way, or maybe in a great way, or where you had to catch yourself because of this book and this training in order to see something differently?
I feel like I'm sharing so much today. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay. There's only like, so it's fine.
Yes, absolutely. So recently had a situation where there was something that kind of happened outside of my control, but it happened under uh over something I was leading. And so it became very much like I was trying to figure out what I was doing wrong or what I had missed, like all these different things. And God was so gracious. He revealed to me that, because the fact that I covered that situation, like I prayed over that situation, I was very obedient in how I led it. God gave me the reality that sometimes things just happen.
Yeah.
And you don't have control over that, but you do have control over how you move forward from that. And I think just understanding that God allows those things to happen to teach us different things, but to also teach all the people who are in that. And I feel like in that moment I could have taken on the pain of that and allowed it to keep me from moving forward in my own leadership because of like, oh my gosh, I messed up somehow. But God was very gracious and really revealing to me that sometimes he allows things to happen
Right.
because he wants to teach us or somebody something. And I think really digging into that and really helping to shift those negative emotions and allow that to be. And I think that goes back to your daily relationship with the Lord too, and knowing how important that is. Because sometimes when things, I was just listening to a podcast today of our sermon saying how, life doesn't ask us, is Tuesday okay to just like wreck your plans? It just happens. And when it does, as long as we're walking with the Lord and we're tethered to him, when those negative emotions come up, we can take those to him and say, okay, God, this is how I'm feeling, but what do you say about this? And I think that really helped me with this, is just understanding that a lot of negative emotions we can turn those into negative beliefs, but if we are able to catch them before that even happens and lay them at the foot of the cross, like God will really begin to allow that to happen more often, I feel like.
Right. And then
So-
those emotions won't have to take root. Because remember, in the other chapter,
Right.
she was saying the more emotional you get about a certain circumstance and the more times you allow yourself to do it, that's when that, rut
Yeah.
is carved, and that's when
Yeah,
that
that
creates
negativity,
the
that
stronghold. So capturing
Yeah.
it when we see it from here on out is huge in order to make that trail get a little back overgrown and carve a new path. That's so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely had one recently, and I was really thankful for this book study because I had like I think one of my fears is getting in trouble or that I did something wrong or that someone would blame me for something. And then like the bigger fear is like that it actually is true and that I did do something and it is my fault. And so I got a text message from someone who I hadn't talked to in months about an event that is coming up. I don't work at the church. My husband does. But for some reason, this lady thought that just talking to me one time 2 months ago was like all that she needed to do for this like whole event that is happening at the church and like the music. And I'm like, I'm not on staff. What do you mean? So like I felt myself like getting riled up. She's like, okay, the event's coming up. When can we meet about everything? And I was like, well, huh? Me? No, that's not, and so I started to get like very internally defensive. Anyway, we had this whole conversation. I texted my husband and I was like, babe, like she's going to email you. Like, I thought that she had already talked to y'all about this. Like, I thought that they would have set this up through the church, blah, 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 blah. So I was just over explaining, overdoing all the things to make sure that I was like, hey, I maybe could have checked in with you about this, but that's not my job. Like this is not my event. This is not my job. Like I got crap going on, right? And so I had this whole thing in my head, like they probably think that I'm an idiot or that I'm a jerk for not having like all of these things. So the way that I was seeing that and the way that I was going to enter into that meeting that was coming up could have been very defensive and anxiety, and it would have made them feel every bit of what I was scared that they would think about me. It would have made all of those things true had I entered into that meeting and acted out, of those places. Like I would have been a jerk and I would have been defensive. And so I caught myself because of one of the chapters that I read before the thing. And I was just like, what if I just decided to think that everyone likes me? What if I just decided to think that they weren't going to not like me and be mad at me, or that I didn't do anything wrong? And what if I just say, oh, you know what? Brandon's great at his job and he's going to fix it and he'll make sure that everything happens and it's just going to be a great event and I can just enter into it from here, forward with a very different thing. And we had a great lunch. It was wonderful. Everyone was fine. But it was totally about what was inside. They could never have thought any of those things and were never worried about anything. No one else could have been as stressed out as I was, but it was all about how I was perceiving the situation based on what I was worried that they were going to think about me and that it was going to be my fault that I hadn't done anything yet. So this whole chart on page 69 illustrates that exactly. And like we said earlier, we could go through the exact same circumstance as any other person, and based on our life experiences and the conclusions we've drawn about ourselves and about how people operate in relationships, we're going to very, very differently, receive those things. So Um, we're pushing time here. I do want to, well, we're supposed to do work and worship. Sorry, Jessica. Um, I love that's a good thing to read through and remind yourself like where I'm at on this list on the right side or the left side is really going to show me where my strongholds are still. Like taking criticism or being able to be humble and be like, oh my goodness, you know what? I did drop the ball on that. And that doesn't mean that I'm a stupid person or that I'm irresponsible. It just means that it was accident. And how can I move forward from here and be helpful from here? Taking criticism, that's a big one. I'm glad she used that as kind of one of the litmus tests here. Because that is like, do we allow criticism to mean you just have no idea what you're doing? Or do we allow criticism to be like, hey, here's an area of growth. Oh, cool. I didn't think about that. Let me see how I can do that differently next time. So good. The grief section was really good. We won't, go over that, but that is very true. How we feel, and what we believe about the people in our lives and our needs and all of that does definitely affect how we grieve when we lose people. I really loved, and we'll end here because this was one of the first things that I had for us to do with work and worship anyway, is I always thought, this is page 70. I always thought that if people really knew me, they would not think so highly of me or that they were just trying to be kind by complimenting me. But then God told me that often others actually see me better than I see myself. The reason this was true was because I was blinded by my emotional beliefs about myself, and others saw my strengths more clearly because they were not seeing through that same filter. So that's so good. Like when people are giving you compliments or when someone says something about you and you're like, yeah, if only you knew, like, thanks. Yeah, I faked that one really good, and it's like, that's because we have all of this feedback we've been collecting and all of this evidence we've been collecting for all of the negative things. Again, that's how we see. What are we getting proof of? It's like when you buy a new car, you see your new car everywhere, and you're like, I never saw this car anywhere. And now everyone has a blue Bronco. Like, what the heck? And so it's the same thing. When we believe something, we're going to find evidence and proof of what our core belief is. And so it's hard to hear when other people don't necessarily agree with it. And they would be shocked probably to think, you think that about yourself? Like, there's no way, right? So switching gears, let's move on to a little bit of work and worship. We got 15 minutes. We can do some things. I wanted us to, in that vein, I think it's helpful for us to be a participant in this as much as it is for us to fix on ourselves, but to understand that everyone feels these things. Everyone has this negative underlying view of themselves at some point where they just don't see themselves the same way that you would see them. So for the first little thing, list out 3 of either your top leaders or 3 influential people in your life that you can encourage, that you can say, I was thinking about you today. We had an exercise come up in our book study. It didn't have to be like totally out of the blue, faking thinking of you. But I just want you to know that this is how I see you. These are the strengths and the beautiful things that I see about you and what I'm thankful for in your life and what your life means to me. And I'm understanding because of this book that we don't always see those things about ourselves. So I wanted you to know this is how I see you from the outside and what I think is true about you. So maybe just think if you don't have 3 people, that's fine. But think of at least one person that you could just love and encourage with I said, be their eyes, encourage them with how you view them, and bless them with your unfiltered sight. Let me turn some music on. Not the trampoline workout from this morning, please. Good. Okay. Well, that made me kind of cry. That was a good exercise, right? Like, I mean, just to feel feel like things that we would think someone would obviously know about themselves or feel was true about themselves, and to realize that they probably don't see those things in themselves. This I just put in there. This was kind of how I started those messages, like, hey, no response needed. After reading a chapter in our book, study about how others see us more truthfully than we see ourselves, I wanted to bless you with my view of you and how I see you, free from the filters of your self-conclusions. And then you can just encourage from there. If anybody wants to do that, that's what that part was. Okay, for the last little bit here, we got about 5 minutes left. I just want, obviously you're gonna have to do IPA at a different time because we ain't got time for that right now. You may have time after this, but we're gonna hop off in 5 minutes. We talked about living under the influence. So what do we need to capture in regards to your business where it comes to what are you LUIing, right? Is your LUI leading you to Leaders Retreat? Is your LUI leading you to getting your gift card if that's what you really wanted for this month, or 2 gift cards? Or are you living under the influence of some beliefs and negative emotions that are keeping you stuck and avoiding, or not entering into those goals that you have for yourself? So take a few minutes to really reevaluate your goals for the month. Where are you? Where do you want to go? We have a full week left. What is propelling you, or what is keeping you stuck? And kind of using these chapters that we had today, narrow that down and get specific about what you want this next week to look like, and how you're going to take those things captive, and what you're going to use to propel you to meet the goals that you have set for yourself, because there is plenty of time left this month, and there's 2 months fully left for Leaders Retreat and getting our points where you want them to be by the end of the year. All of those things. It's our beliefs that we have to change that create actions that bring forth that destination, right? So let's take the next 5 minutes and just really get specific about where we're going this week and what influence we are living under.
God of creation, there at this time, what if we not know? The one spoken in love, sees see us.
And I hate to stop the song at that part because that's like the best part of the song. But it is 1:30. I want to thank you for being on with me today, ladies, for sticking with me and for participating in this book study. I'm recording to the cloud, so hopefully Jessica will get the recording finagled and posted. I don't even know how to do that, how to put that on YouTube once you've recorded it to the cloud, but it will be recorded. So you guys have a great rest of your day. Share this for sure. If you want to do a couple more people that you want to encourage, I think that was a good practice. But let's move forward the rest of the week with these new beliefs and these new thoughts around who we're becoming. Bye, you guys.